And then it's been 8 years since 72 people tragically lost their lives in the devastating Grenfell Tower fire.
On Saturday, thousands gathered in West London to mark the anniversary as survivors and bereaved relatives continue their fight for justice.
In the early hours of the 14th of June 2017, a fire tore through Grenfell Tower, a 24-storey block of flats in West London, with hundreds of residents still inside.
The smoke was extremely thick, black. Every time I opened the door and tried to breathe, it was just a gagging sensation.
Fuelled by the highly flammable cladding on the building's exterior, the blaze killed 72 people, including 18 children.
There's an internal Arconic email where they say the grade of the panel following the test today is an F, which is just uncategorizable, ungradable, and then just the word oops. They learned that once you bent this product into a certain shape, you were going to get this terrible result in a fire.
An official inquiry painted a damning picture of missed warnings, cost-cutting, and a building system riddled with failures. Yet despite the evidence, no one has ever been convicted for the failings that led to the fire. And 8 years on, the survivors and families of the bereaved are still fighting for justice. Well, we're joined now by survivor Marcio Gomes, who tragically lost his unborn son Logan as a result of the fire. And he's alongside journalist Peter Apps, who has written over 1,000 articles on the tragedy. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Marcio, can you explain, you lived at Grenfell Tower for how long?
I was a baby to the tower, so I was there for 10 years.
10 years, so it was home. Just tell us a little bit about Grenfell Tower and what it was like living there.
It was a beautiful place. It had its own micro-community, if you like, because you get to meet a lot of... I had young kids at the time, and you get to meet a lot of the parents going to school, waiting for the lifts, and you have fantastic conversation. And it was just its own little micro-community. Everybody knew each other, everybody played in the corridor. Our doors were generally always open for the kids to run in and out.
We've just passed, on Saturday, the anniversary of a day that nobody ever wanted to go through, but of course we don't want to forget. I wonder what that was like for you.
The anniversary?
Yeah.
It was very emotional, especially this year because of Angela Rayner's decision to bring down the tower. So it was the last time we're going to see the tower as how it is at the moment. So it was a very emotional time for us.
Can you tell us a little bit about the day when it actually happened? And you were quite high up on the tower, weren't you? When did you realise there was something wrong?
Yeah, so I lived on the 21st floor with my family. It was just a normal day. It was really hot. The day was really hot. We decided to go out for dinner as a family with a group of friends. Because it was a school night, went home a little bit earlier, put the kids to sleep. And then I was up for a little bit later, and I think I just went to bed just after midnight that day. And then I was woken at 1:15 in the morning with my neighbour banging on our door, which I'm forever grateful, because if it wasn't for that, we would have been sleeping. So that's generally how we woke up that morning.
So then you stayed in your flat, and the fire brigade were all told that the stay put rule, which is essentially you stay there for 2 hours. The fire had started much lower down from a fridge or freezer. And you're in your flat and you start getting towels and wetting them, because you're thinking to yourself, just in case, you've got 2 daughters, you had a pregnant wife at the time. When did you realise that it was actually really dangerous and you needed to start moving against the advice of the firefighters?
Probably about an hour into it, I would say.
Right.
When I really understood how bad it was.
Yeah.
You know, we've had fires in the tower before.
Yeah.
It's not generally a problem. You know, it's contained. And then sometimes even in the morning, going, oh, we had a fire last night. And that's that kind of level it was. Of course, that night, it was very different. So when I first opened the door to my neighbour, the lights were on, couldn't really see much going on. Thought, OK, normal fire, phoned the 999, and it was, you know, stay put, you're going to be safe there, that kind of thing, which is fine, and that's the advice we kind of went with. Probably about an hour into it, when I tried to go into my neighbour's house, I opened the door the first time, and it was pitch black. The lights were on,
really
but
thick smoke,
black.
Right, too?
It was really thick.
Like that thick, dirty black smoke that kind of feels as though you're choking.
It was awful. It was something I've never experienced before.
Yeah.
I think there's a clip where I opened the door, and I did that shortly after, because nobody was going to believe me if I said to them it was pitch black.
You filmed it, didn't you?
I did film it, yeah. And as soon as you breathe that in, you were just gagging. It was a horrific smell. I mean, it was something I can never really describe that well. And that was when I knew this is really bad.
I think you phoned the fire brigade 5 times before finally they said, right, you need to leave.
Well, I think it was the fourth time when they said, oh, we've changed our
protocol
policy. But even at that point, I explained, look, I've got a 7-month, a pregnant wife at 7 months pregnant, my 2 kids, one asthmatic as well, and I've got my neighbour and her child with me. You know, we need some help here. Although they said, yes, the stay put policy has been revoked, we're still sending somebody up to come and get you, and that's kind of what I was waiting for.
And in the end, you decided you couldn't wait any longer. You needed to get out. What was that like, Marcio, for you and the family, trying to get from the 21st floor of a tower that was then fully ablaze and getting through the smoke?
Couldn't see anything.
And what was going on around you?
Well, initially, we tried twice before and failed for different reasons. First, it was my neighbour couldn't go through it because the first time they opened the door and saw the pitch black and the smoke, you know, and it's quite difficult going into the unknown. The second time, it was my wife at the time who panicked as well, and quite rightly.
Yeah.
Being 7 months pregnant, she knew that there was going to be problems. And then when we were forced to leave was the third attempt, the 5th 999 call, where it just so happens I was on the call with the London Fire Brigade, and as I looked into my bedroom, the fire came through our window, and it set the curtains, the Moses basket, basically my room alight, and I only had time to really just close the door. And at that point, I said, we've got to go. It's now or never. We couldn't stay in the flat anymore.
And there was so much confusion as well at that time. You couldn't see anything. The girls were... You were supposed to be behind the girls and you were taking them down, and then you kind of lost them within the smoke. When you finally get to the bottom of the tower, you see each other again, you get taken in an ambulance, but your wife, who is 7 months pregnant and asthmatic too, right? They have to make a terrible decision at that point.
Yeah. At the hospital, they came to me and said, came to me and said they had to make that decision. Yeah. And because my wife's obviously alive, they had to go with her.
They had to make a terrible choice.
Which I said, yes, that's the choice.
It's heartbreaking to hear what you've been through, you and all those other families. Peter, the most painful thing about all of it is it was preventable.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that should never have happened. I think it wasn't just preventable, it was something that I think some of the companies and people involved in this story knew was going to happen, because they were allowing a product onto the market that had this very obvious and very serious risk attached to it, and they were allowing that to be installed on the homes of people like Marcio and his family.
Why were they allowing that to happen?
So the material that was used to clad Grenfell Tower is something called aluminium composite material. So it's 2 thin sheets of aluminium held together with a plastic called polyethylene. And polyethylene is chemically very similar to petrol. So you're talking about, it's not combustible on the outside, but in the middle, you're effectively putting petrol cans on the walls of people's homes. It looks quite sleek, it looks metallic, but it's plastic and it burns very ferociously. The thing about that product, though, is it's quite cheap. We use it to make road signs and that sort of thing, and it's a cheap product, which means that subcontractors can keep their profit margins high by buying the cheapest material possible and keeping a profit margin up. And so that's why it's favoured, not just on Grenfell Tower, but on hundreds of other tower blocks around the UK and thousands around the world, because it looks nice, it looks expensive, but it's cheap.
But also, Peter, not by that much. Like, I think they were trying to save £40 a flat or something like that. Isn't it something? It's a ridiculous amount of money.
There's a more fire retardant version of the cladding, which where the polyethylene is diluted with non-combustible.
Yeah.
And that's what is actually supposed to be used on higher risk buildings. That would have cost £2 to £3 per square metre more.
It's just...
and so over the whole job, I think that's sort of about £5,000 to £7,000. This is a £10 million job. So you're talking about a fractional expense being saved.
Yeah. When I watched the documentary as well, I also felt so much sympathy as well towards the firefighters who weren't given enough information and they were going into this burning building, but they didn't really fully understand what was going on. And then they were telling everybody to stay put.
Yeah, I mean, you have to say that on the part of the institution of the London Fire Brigade, there was a huge failure.
Yeah.
And they've acknowledged this now in the years before the Grenfell Tower fire, because there was awareness in the industry that this was a risk, but there was also awareness within the fire brigade that there were cladding materials being used in London that were going to undermine this stay put strategy. We'd had a fire in 2009 that killed 6 people, again, all of whom were told to stay put, and who could have survived if they weren't. And the fire brigade and the government should have addressed that and said, well, OK, a fire might get out of control again. Let's work out how to get everyone out safely.
Yeah.
You know, it's a difficult thing to do, but it's possible. Yeah. But that question was just never asked.
The London Fire Brigade Commission, Andy Rose, says on the night of the fire, the brigade faced the most formidable challenge that any fire service in the UK has confronted in living memory. In 2019, the brigade accepted every recommendation from the Grenfell Tower inquiry Phase 1 report and have since implemented significant changes to how we operate. So it feels like they, clearly they have reacted to this. This is what Arconic said. Our thoughts remain with all those affected, their families and friends. Arconic Architectural Products, along with others, has made financial contributions to settlements for those impacted. We support all efforts to strengthen regulatory oversight in the construction industry. No one has been held responsible, Marcio, for what happened, for the loss of life, for you losing your unborn child. What do you think needs to happen?
I think they need to be held accountable. I think you've seen from the documentary and the inquiry, they knew what they were doing. Yeah. They knew the products was unsafe, but yet they put profit ahead of people's safety. You've seen from the emails where I think the one you just showed was oops at the end of it. I think there was another email as well which said, if a fire was to occur, potentially it could be 60 or 70 people could die. And in this occasion, it was 72.
Yeah.
So they knew exactly what they were doing. Yeah. So in my opinion, they need to face the consequences.
Peter, where are we with the cladding on Grenfell? Because I know that there was big moves in terms of taking that cladding down off a number of buildings around the UK. Has that happened to most of the tower blocks that have it on?
So the specific type of cladding that was on Grenfell, the ACMPE stuff, a lot of that has been taken off, yeah. So not all of it, but a lot of it. But there's thousands and thousands of other buildings, anything up to 10,000, we don't even know how many, which have other types of combustible materials, some of which are less dangerous, some of which are almost as dangerous as what was on Grenfell. And globally, Arconic are not just a UK company, they're multinational. They've sold this all over the world. We had a fire in Dubai just last weekend where it was exactly the same material. I think one of the things to dwell on is the organisation that knows where this was sold. The organisation knows where it was sold all over the world is Arconic, and the other suppliers of these materials. They haven't been held to account. Not, you mentioned there that they've made a financial contribution. It is tiny compared to the levels of profits that they've made since the fire. And I really think that's where accountability needs to focus.
Yeah. Marcio, they've said that they've got to demolish the tower because it's not safe. Yeah. What would you like to see there? What would you like to see done?
Well, I don't agree with that.
You don't?
I don't agree with Angela's decision.
Yeah.
On a number of points, one being that she didn't consult the bereaved, the survivors. Yeah. Although she claims she had, but she hasn't, because we've spoken together and nobody had any input into that decision. Yeah. And we have to also remember that it's not just a tower. We're not just talking about a tower. I mean, I was fortunate enough that my son was born in the hospital and I was able to bury him whole. But my neighbours didn't make it out. They were cremated in the tower. The tower is a tombstone as well. So we have to be very sensitive to that situation. Now, I'm not naive. I understand that there's cost involved, which is generally what they look at. The tower is fine structurally. It's not going to fall down. Nobody's in danger. But they can do something different rather than just knocking it all the way down. And in my mind, it's almost like get it outside and then out of mind, and it will just help them move forward. But for us, we'll never move forward. I live it 365 days a year. So it needs to be a beacon of change, and hopefully it will be a catalyst of change.
Well, as Kat and I was saying, we pass it every day. It's such a sort of iconic building, and you see the cladding on the side now, and it's always there for all of us as a reminder.
Don't forget,
No, we won't forget. The government have said, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government said, we will deliver the change needed so this can never happen again by taking decisive action to speed up remediation through the Remediation Acceleration Plan and delivering the recommendations of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. I'd imagine you and the other residents just want to be a part of the decision now. Angela Rayner has announced that it has to come down, of what happens next with the site.
Yeah, there's a memorial commission, which is underway at the moment, has been for a number of years. And then that will hopefully dictate what, through the bereaved and the survivors, what will happen in the future in terms of a memorial site. Including the community.
Sure.
You know, we're all in it together, really. But for me, one of the main things is the height. And whatever memorial is in there, there has to be a height, and you need to be able to see it. As you mentioned, you know, you see it when you drive into work, and everybody sees it from all sorts of angles. So
that's a really important point. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for sharing that. It's not easy, Marcio. Both Marcio and Peter have contributed to the new Netflix documentary Grenfell Uncovered, which you can watch from Friday.
Thank you for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload new content every day, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and we'll see you in the morning.